Hey, Danny. Jen snuck in ahead of you from Middletown, Connecticut. Oh, you're in Tokyo? Wow, I don't know how you do this. Urbana and Nancy, you flipped by. Naperville, I grew up in Wheaton. Scottsburg, Indiana. Boy, Indiana's doing interesting things lately, isn't it? Pennsylvania and Maryland and Reading and Portland, Oregon. Okay, so I just got here and I've been traveling a lot, as you know. I just got here and I've actually got to be dressed and ready for another event that I need to prep for by 5:30. And I got to walk there. So this is not going to be long today, but there were a few things I really wanted to put on your radar screens. And, if you would like, I am perfectly happy to start doing these more frequently and shorter. I sort of feel like an hour is a long time commitment. Not so much for me because I'm used to doing this, but for you. And I could do like 8 minute to 15-minute things here and or on my YouTube channel, and I'm happy to do that because there are a lot of things that need just short explanations, and I'm quite happy to do that. If you think that would be a good thing, please drop a note in the chat and let me know that, or drop me an email. I really don't see the messages that come through Facebook all that much. Anyway, what I really wanted to talk about today were two things, but I'm going to add a third because you've written so many notes to me about it. The third one I'll start with first, and that is what on earth is going on with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is compromised. There's a problem with the Supreme Court, and I could tell you about the history of the Supreme Court. We have had compromised Supreme Courts in the past. We have never had a Supreme Court that did not believe in the Constitution. They interpreted the Constitution to suit their own ends for sure, but for in this case now in the United States, it appears that we have a Supreme Court on which 5 members sit who do not believe in the Constitution, that in fact they would like to base us in religion rather than in the Constitution. That's a huge problem, obviously. Now we know, of course, that Justice Clarence Thomas has been really sort of on the payroll of wealthy people like Harlan Crow, who's the one who gave him the RV and took care of bought his property and then let his mother live there and did all the sorts of things that he felt they needed to do in order to keep him on the court because he complained that there was not enough money to be made on the court. That's a real problem when you think about the fact that the Citizens United decision of 2010 and later on the Shelby County versus Holder decision of 2013, which gutted the Voting Rights Act, were both 4-5 decisions, that is, or 5-4 decisions. That is, Justice Thomas's vote really mattered. And of course, we also have Alito there, and now Alito has demonstrated his disrespect for the Constitution of the United States. And then we have the 3 justices that were added by Donald Trump, who has now been found a convicted felon. And the reason that he became a convicted felon was for hiding business records to hide the fact that he had paid to have a sex scandal buried before the 2016 election, with the belief that he would not win if in fact that got out. So there's many reasons to think that the 2016 election gave us somebody who not only lost the popular vote but got into the White House in illegal ways. Not to say he wasn't necessarily president. That's a different conversation about the Electoral College, by the way. But there's a lot of hanky-panky going on with those 3 justices as well. So what can you do? Keep up the pressure for sure on not only Dick Durbin, who is the Illinois senator who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, but also the Republicans like Mitch McConnell who got us into this mess. That being said, no, they're not going to pay any attention to you. You're not going to be able to change their opinions, but you are going to be able to change the opinions of people who are not yet baked in, which is what we're doing going forward. And yes, there has got to be a lot of work done on the Supreme Court, but at least we know now. So I can't give you a magic solution to the Supreme Court except to say keep up pressure, because the thing that the Supreme Court depends upon is that people buy into it, that they say we're going to agree to these decisions. And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people are beyond the place where we're willing to let 5 compromised people take away our right to bodily autonomy, for example, take away our right to clean water, to clean air, and so on. And the recognition that they have lost that faith is going to matter, if not to them, to the people who are trying to preserve American democracy. Okay, that's all I have to say about that today. But there are 2 other things I want to talk about. The first is that I'm trying in my head to decide which to go with. The first is that I want you to understand, and this is really important, that things are going to get really rocky and mean for the next 5 months. But I want you to understand that Marjorie Taylor Greene would not be melting down the way she is. Donald Trump would not be melting down the way he is. Right-wing talk show people would not be melting down the way they are if they thought they were going to win. Think about it. Think about your lives. Think about your children. Think about the people when you've been in organizations. If you are in control of the situation, you do not have to scream. You do not have to try and manipulate things. When you start yelling and screaming and trying to manipulate things, it means you know you are losing. So I know people are really sort of recoiling from what Marjorie Taylor Greene sounded like in the House Oversight Committee, Special Committee on the Coronavirus. I really would love it if they had shorter titles yesterday. But she, think about when she felt like she was in power with in the House, when she felt like she was really going to be calling the shots. She kind of threw her chest out and she was out there, talking about, running the country and bringing people together and so on. Now that she knows she's on the ropes, she is turning mean and vicious again. And you see this with Trump. You see this with Trump's people. You see it across the board. So as this meanness happens, and it's going to get bad, even worse than it is, think about, again, a fifth grader throwing a temper tantrum. When they do that, they know it's because they're not in control of themselves or of the situation. And that's a really important thing to remember, because I see so many people, decent people, who just want to take this country back to a place where we can trust our institutions. That doesn't mean we necessarily care if we're Republicans or Democrats. We just want to be able to say, we don't really care who gets elected, because we know we're going to have the Fed operating generally as the Fed does. And yeah, maybe I'm a little bit unhappy with a percentage point of interest, but I can live with that. And, really, we know we need some adjustments in the way that our military works, but basically we're pretty confident we'll be okay. And yeah, we all get mad when we get to there's paperwork that doesn't get done for the government, but basically, the government people are there. That's the kind of world that we want to get back to. And there's so many of us, and they see Marjorie Taylor Greene screaming, and they see Trump flailing away the way he is, and they get scared, and they think they're the ones in control. And that's how fascists rise, is they cow the decent people into thinking they've already lost. We have not already lost. To the contrary, the conviction of Donald Trump by 12 ordinary Americans last Thursday was a game changer. And I mean, it's a game changer in many ways, but I think what it did is it showed people that ordinary people are still decent people, and we still believe in the facts, and we still believe in the institutions. They're not always right, but the framework is a good framework. And what's interesting to me is, I'm traveling. What's interesting to me is that it feels to me, and this is, as I say, I use that verb very deliberately because it's a feeling about my absorption of media, which is kind of what I do, right? I see what the world is out there, and I always think of myself sort of as a sausage grinder. I see what's out there, and then I see what it looks like, and then I push it back to you all, seeing what it looks like to me. And it feels to me as if a number of largely younger media personalities are pushing back on Trump. They are not in the former traditional bubbles of media. There aren't norms for them, and they're really starting to push things. And if you're interested, the new names that are coming up are important ones. This isn't really new, but Josh Marshall's Talking Points memo has wonderful young political reporters who've been pushing back forever. But we have ProPublica doing these blockbuster stories, including the suggestion, anyway, that former President Donald Trump has been paying off the witnesses who were supposed to testify against him in the federal cases. And that will be very, very hard to prove, all the lawyers say, because it's not like you write a contract saying, for shutting up, I'm giving you $2 million. But it certainly doesn't look very good. That was a ProPublica story where that broke. You're seeing more and more reports of things that happened with Trump in the past that people didn't feel comfortable talking about and now do, either because their non-disclosure agreements have expired or because they're ignoring those non-disclosure agreements. There increasingly seems to be this crescendo of concern about Trump being in power. And this I find very interesting because there's always been a question in history and in political science of whether Trump's supporters could be translated to someone else. That is, when you have a strong man, will the strong man's people, can they flip to somebody else? And I have always been of the opinion that they couldn't. And that was one of the things that was going to make things hard for somebody like Nikki Haley, or even people who were sort of mini Trumps like Ron DeSantis. He of the white boots. I'm so sorry, I couldn't resist that. Um, Being able to pick up Trump's people, and and I think there's something else at play here now, and that I always thought that the reason the MAGAs wouldn't leave Trump behind and go with a less problematic candidate was because they were afraid that the voters wouldn't follow him. But if you've watched, and there's no reason for you to have done this, but I'm not the only person who picked this up, which is what makes me willing to say it. Since the conviction, people like Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene have gotten just supercharged, superheated, super angry, and seemingly super scared. And my guess is that they are very concerned about the roles that they played in 2020 in trying to overturn the election, as more and more of those people, higher and higher up the scale, are being indicted. Another indictment came down today, and that's gonna make them more and more angry and more worried as we're going forward here. And that the more that conviction opened up, said he's not invulnerable. When he came out and he sort of melted down, and then the next day was even worse. I think the tide with regard to Trump has turned so that people are more willing to criticize and more willing to step up and say, well, I didn't like him anyway. And, things like the Colin Cowherd this weekend, I thought that was a wonderful piece he did on, he's a sportscaster, but on how, cut it out, stop lying to me. The world is not nearly as bad as you're making out to be. So that leads me into the other piece that I wanted to make sure I covered. And that's a funny piece for me because it is history in the sense that a lot of what I do is I study psychology to see how people act in the past. I do not have a psychology degree. I have read very heavily, both theoretically and in clinical studies of psychology, not psychiatry, but psychology, to try and understand the different mindsets that people take into historical moments. And something that somebody said this morning really, really articulated for me, made a leap for me in a way that I had not articulated for myself before. And at the minute I read it, I said, I know what I want to say to people today, even if I'm running down the streets of this city to try and get here. And that's that the piece that I am reacting to was from Jessica Valenti, who writes about abortion. And she was writing about somebody that the Republicans have put forward as a major figure on abortion. And she was pointing out that this person will not admit ever that there is such a thing as a non-viable fetus. She's changed the language of that to make it sound as if there is a chance that a fetus might survive, with the end point of trying to guarantee that nobody will ever get an abortion, even to save their health, even to save, even because a fetus is non-viable, because she is so convinced that abortion should never, ever, ever happen. And all of a sudden it clicked for me. You've heard me say this before, that if you have to lie for a political party or for a political position, there is no validity to your position. That is, you need to be able to base your policies on reality. You need to be honest about what they do. Now politicians always spin. They're never going to say to you, well, it might work, it might not. They're going to say it's going to work, and here's why. That's spin. That's a different thing than flat out lying. The way Trump said on Saturday, I never said lock her up. I mean, that was just completely ridiculous. But the way you're seeing nowadays with things like school vouchers, saying all we're doing is giving students choice. Well, we know, if you look at the statistics, first of all, lots of rural areas have no private schools. So that doesn't give those students a choice. The money for these voucher programs actually goes to people who are already in private school. So they're essentially a gift of taxpayer money to people who have money. And we also know that because those schools don't have any requirements for who's there, that they are discriminatory schools, often religious schools or racially segregated And finally, because they don't have to be accredited, their outcomes are worse than those of public schools. So if you want to improve American schools, as we all do, I'm not saying they're bad, but you always want to make things better, right? You need to start with the facts. And the fact that the people pushing the vouchers are simply lying to you and saying, oh, this gives people choice and isn't that great? And anybody who doesn't want to do this is trying to take away your choices for your children. That's just not reality. And I could go on and on and on about this. But the reason that it really clicked for me, and I've always talked about it politically, and said that when a political movement needs to lie to you, as the current day Republicans are doing. And mind you, the Republicans were not always like this. They used to be really into the idea of scientifically based ideas to put into practice. Eisenhower, for example. You know what Eisenhower said was his favorite thing he ever did? Was when he ran Columbia University. And many people were kind of snide about that, like, oh, he's just a general, he doesn't know how to run a university. In fact, he started a very powerful global organization there, but he was a very, very bright man and very well read, very learned, and he recognized that the world needed new solutions to the problems of the nuclear age. And like that was, I mean, he was Eisenhower, Republican president, right? That could be the Republicans again. It sure as heck isn't them now, but the fact that they are no longer trying to grapple with reality at all. You know, they're lying that Trump won the 2020 election. They're lying that there's voter fraud. They're lying that they're not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. They're flat out lying. First of all, says that their ideology is hollow. There's nothing there except the attempt to get what they want. And I'm going to explain what that is in just a minute in a very macro sense. So I've always thought about it politically. And I've described it personally, but what really jumped out to me after reading Jessica Valenti's piece this morning was that what they are trying to do, the people who lie to you, and in this case in a political sense, is they're taking away your right of self-determination. And I've said that before, that what they're saying to you is that you can't be trusted with the facts. You have to be lied to. You have to be manipulated into doing what they want you to do. And if you think about it, think about trying to run a business with somebody who, you're trying to make business plans and the person isn't telling you that in fact they've already accepted another job somewhere else, or that they've been skimming out of the till and there isn't any money, or that they know that they're helping a competitor. You can't make good business decisions unless stuff is on the table. Well, what the Valenti piece did for me today was it said, it's not just about political control, which is the way I've thought about it, but to lie to somebody about something as basic as whether or not their fetus can live. I mean, doctors can say this is a condition incompatible with life, which are tragic, tragic situations. To lie and tell an expectant mother that in fact, her baby might actually be okay. And to put somebody through that does far more than simply takes away their right to plan a good business. That seems to me to be messing not only with the right of human self-determination, but also absolutely with the right of personhood. Like, not only am I going to steal your right to make good decisions about your business, for example, or good decisions about government, I'm going to steal away your right to make basic decisions about your humanity. And that to me was a huge intellectual leap that I wanted to make sure that I called out. Because again, what always gets me, and you hear me say this all the time, for me, what I do is not about convincing people to vote one way or another. It's about reinforcing the idea of a reality-based world. That I'm going to tell you what the facts are. And sometimes people say, oh, you're always attacking the Republicans, or oh, you're a shill for the Democrats. And I'm like, I am literally telling you what happened today. And often many people miss this. Often when I tell you what happened, I don't necessarily approve of it. That's a different role for me, and I will advocate that in some roles. But when I'm telling you what happened yesterday, I'm telling you what happened yesterday. I'm not telling you if I approve of it or if I disapprove of it. I'm saying here's the facts. I trust you as smart human beings, which has nothing to do with education, by the way, to make good decisions if you are provided the right information. And when you have people who are lying to you, not only about politics and about the economy, but also about your own bodily integrity, I think we need to call it out. And I think we need really to recognize that the level of dishonesty and lying in the Republican Party is something more than simply politics. It is about a dehumanization of those of us they are lying to. We have no right to political self-determination or to human self-determination in their minds. Now, mind you, I'm sure they don't think about that when they're lying, when they're going in front of the TV cameras and lying. Maybe some of them do. But I promise you what they are thinking is, I need to be in power because I need to put my own ideas into practice. And yet if you deconstruct what that actually means, what it says is that those people I'm lying to are mine to do with as I wish. And that is fundamentally a terrifying idea, but one I think that we can understand if you look at it in the issue that Jessica Valenti brought up, that's somebody literally lying to you about whether your fetus is a viable baby. I mean, that's just, to me, that's like mind-boggling. And I think that that maybe humanizes it in a way. Me sitting here saying, well, Ted Cruz is lying to you about the electric grid, maybe doesn't so much. So I really want to call that out today. And I am afraid now, you will love this, I need to shower and change and get ready and get like a mile away from here in the next 45 minutes. You want to take bets as to whether or not I can do it? I will try and do one of these that is more, so Beth, I'm sorry, Beth Voss just asked if I would post the pictures of Trump waving where known as there. That is linked in last night's letter, which is on Facebook right below this chat. And I'm afraid I don't remember which one it is, but I know it's there. And I'm afraid I can't remember. And there were a number of them on Twitter yesterday. You might want to just go on Twitter and Google, not Twitter, search for Trump waves to no one or something. It came from a number of different sources, but it is linked. This is why I link all my notes, is so that you can know that, mind you, I have been misled in the past and exhausted the other night. I switched to organizations I think of as being very similar, but they are not. That's in my head. I do make mistakes, but I trust people enough to say to them, I'm not making shit up. Here it is. And that's actually what this enterprise is all about. So anyway, somebody, you know what? Somebody else put this in the chat for her. I'm telling you to go look for it. Somebody else just put it in the chat. Some of you know where it is. All right, now I have 2 minutes less to go get ready for this event. So I will try and do these more frequently. If you do want me to do shorter ones and post them both here and on my YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel. Not that I use it as well as I should, but as of, I'm on the road for another week, and then I'm on the road at the end of the month. And then I'm kind of around for the summer, so I could do a lot there. If you are interested in this, put it in the chat and I will look at it and we'll make it work. All right, I will talk to you later. Thank you for being here.